call the May 28th, 2026 meeting of the Brattleboro Charter Revision Commission to order. We're gonna be getting the minutes for next meeting. Jessica has done them and is sending them to us. I have no reasons to modify the agenda. Does anyone else have any reason to wanna modify the agenda? Okay, we'll move right into old business, which is, we're gonna pick up where we left off from last week, which is the form of annual town meeting to include in the charter. And as a quick recap for anybody who hasn't watched last week's meeting yet, or 2 weeks ago meeting, and or needs a refresher, where we left it was, we talked about the results of the March vote, and whether we should in any way change what we have in the charter, which is right now Open Town Meeting. Peter and I asked for an opportunity to put some information together about how we might be able to do a combined Open Town Meeting Australian ballot. And so that's what we want to talk to you folks about right now. And we have put some information together for anybody who's watching on TV. You can go to the Brattleboro.gov website, go to the charter page, and you'll find the handouts that we're going to be referring to. And before I start, I just want everyone to know, we're not presuming right now that we're going with a combined. I mean, Peter and I are not sitting here doing this as if we've all decided to go with a combined system, because we know some people might not want to. But what we asked last meeting is if we could come forward with how we might be able to do a combined system. So we put a cover memo together, and I'm gonna let Peter talk about some of this because we equally did the work together, and I don't wanna hog the spotlight.
Go ahead, Madam Chair.
But, yeah, and what we did is we took some of the suggestions that we received at the last meeting, and we listened to Hillary, and we talked to Hillary again, and we talked to some other people, and we've come up with, I think, 3 things to talk about, and we might find there's something else that we need to talk about, but we put down what we came up with. And again, none of this is cast in stone, it's just we need a place to start the conversation. So we have like 3 different kind of suggestions, and Peter, again, if I say anything wrong, step in.
Go ahead.
The first was a suggestion we received from the public last week, which would be to do the Open Town Meeting in January and have the budget vote on the first Tuesday in March, to coincide with the vote that we already do on Town Meeting Day. Then we did a Town Meeting Day, same March 7th, or would be March 7th, 2028, but Town Meeting Day, the Australian ballot for elected officials and everything would be done the first Tuesday in March as always. We would do an open town meeting either the first or second Saturday in March, followed after that 30 to 40 days later by an Australian ballot vote. So that would be, not changing. On the budget, Australian ballot vote on the budget. So not flipping the order, keeping the order the same. And then there's 2 different ways that any of this could happen, or the Australian ballot vote that would happen after Town Meeting Day could either happen automatically, or it could be activated by either a vote at Open Town Meeting or by a citizen, I don't wanna say petition or referendum or whatever. So there are different ways that could happen. So what you have, and I'm gonna let Peter walk through these too, is there's a sheet here that says information regarding the 3 alternatives for a combined system. That is where those are laid out. And what we've tried to do is not pick one over the other, but to say like, this is how this would happen, and this is why this might work, and this might not work. and the pros and the cons. And obviously, this is not a comprehensive list, and I'm sure people here are gonna look at it and go, well, what about this, what about that? But we need to start the discussion somewhere, so that's why we have this right now. So Peter, I don't know if you wanna walk
Sure.
through this?
Yeah.
And we're gonna look at this memo again that says on the top, information regarding the 3 alternatives.
So what we tried to do in this document was name aspects that differentiate one or two from the other one or two, so that it gives a little bit of an opportunity to frame the conversation that we'll be getting into shortly, where we it's more of a pros and cons kind of a conversation. Here we were trying to just state factual impacts of choosing one versus another. So for instance, the first 2 bullets for both the January OTM alternative and the automatic AB, if it's AB, OTM, AB, for both of those 2 alternatives, the first 2 bullets are clarity and consistency, because we would all know ahead of time what the rules are. So there's going to be a certain sort of cadence to it that we would follow, and we would follow it automatically, whichever of those 2 might be the chosen option. And then as you get deeper down into the bullets for each of those 2, there are some things that distinguish them. The January alternative would be the most efficient in terms of the use of the voters' time, only having to show up 1 time for an AB, and also of town government's resources in terms of not having to have multiple steps to the process. But it would require that the town government, the town administration, and the select board prepare a budget earlier by at least a month. Right now there's kind of some play in it. The budget is typically finished by about the 1st of February, even though traditionally we haven't been considering it in town meeting until the middle of March. So we think that that can be tightened, and it'll be approximately a month earlier that the budget process would need to start and be completed in order to make this system work. And there's a logistical question about the basketball season. Being in January, in the middle of basketball season, might make it more complicated to get the BUHS gym. I'll say personally, I think the governance aspects are more important than the access to the gym. I think we can work through as a community options that might be available, but the preference has been clearly identified to continue to meet in the gym, and so we named that as a concern from if we chose that first option. The second one would automatically require 2 Australian ballot votes each year, each spring. The town meeting day vote and then the later vote on the budget. Although it's been observed that perhaps if the second vote is just on the budget, that we might be able to have that be not a full-blown, fully staffed kind of election setup like we typically have at the Legion, but maybe could be done more cost effectively. So there's a conversation still to be had around the logistical aspect of that. And then the third is less consistent. This option of a conditional, we've called it Australian ballot, where there would be under certain conditions an Australian ballot vote would be held rather than automatically every year on the budget. It lacks consistency and clarity. There would be variation from year to year depending on circumstances. That means that there is the potential of saving time and money on years when the budget is not a contentious issue in town. But it also means that there's less certainty and potential for more confusion around the process, and maybe harder for people to participate in the process. One way to help alleviate that, if this was the chosen path, would be to have an automatic activator. So something like how the action is taken at town meeting affects whether or not the Australian ballot is automatically warned. And of course, there would always be the opportunity to petition to have it heard. A nice thing about the automatic option, if it was AB, OTM, AB, is no petition would ever be required, because the the vote on the budget would automatically occur each year. And so from a sort of community civic health perspective, as well as a time efficiency in trying to make sure that this process gets done whenever possible before July 1st and the beginning of a new fiscal year, that there are some pretty clear advantages to, if it is AB, OTM, AB, some pretty clear advantages to having it be automatic rather than conditional. We also suggest, so I'll say, from my perspective, not necessarily our perspective, because we haven't discussed it this way, I don't have a strong preference for any one of these. I have some concerns about each one, and I'm looking forward to the conversation to see where we might land. But we did have conversations about some aspects of this that we thought should apply to any of the alternatives that might be chosen. So there's different paths we could travel, but then in traveling those paths, there's certain aspects of a new system that we thought would be important. And so I say we on this one because we did have extensive conversation and framed this language together. We heard a suggestion that OTM ought to not be able to reject a budget. The OTM ought to have an obligation to pass a budget, whether it's the select board's recommended budget or whether it's an amended one. We think that's a good suggestion. Again, one of the things that we're going to need to be mindful of as we decide on a system is the passage of time. And there's timelines for each of these different alternatives that are some sample timelines that are provided as part of the backup tonight. It's not the only way that each one could unfold, but it's in each case, the way that made the most sense to us in terms of the 30 to 40 day timelines that are required for gaps in between as each different piece of this gets warned. And so there are circumstances where it will be challenging to get a budget adopted by July 1st in order to implement with the beginning of the new fiscal year. There's also safeguards that we could put into the charter to make it really clear that town government has the authority to continue to operate on July 1st if there isn't an approved budget for the new year, that they can operate in accordance with the authority of the prior year's budget, as if it had been readopted identical to what it was in the prior year, just to tide the town over so it keeps functioning in July while we, the community, finish our work on approving what it's going to be for the new year. So we think that getting into July for a final decision, it really isn't, to use informal language, not the end of the world. And it's also definitely not the best outcome. It's an outcome that has negative practical implications for the operation of town government that we should try to avoid if we can. And so we think that it's an advantage for that reason to have OTM have to pass out something, whether they amend what's brought to them by the select board or whether they approve it as the select board has proposed it. Having to approve something at OTM to send to the Australian ballot phase of this, we think is appropriate. And then we also think it's appropriate that for the Australian ballot vote to reject the budget that is sent to the ballot by OTM, that the threshold for rejection of the budget should be 60% plus one rather than 50% plus one, so a supermajority required. The thinking there is that back to what brought us even into this conversation, those of you who were in the room, and I think about half of you were and about half of you weren't last week or 2 weeks ago, heard the discussion of the commission around interpreting the results of the election. And so we have some difference of opinion among us that we will work through as we have this conversation around the outcome of the election either being indicating to us that the people of the town want both aspects of this system or don't necessarily want both aspects of this system. I'm not going to try to speak for others about the alternative point of view, but for Kate and me, we do think that the outcome of the vote said, the people of the town said, by a small margin, we're done with our RTM. And then by relatively larger margins for both OTM and AB, we like both of these systems. So when asked, what would you replace RTM with? The voters of the town said, we would like to replace it with OTM. They also said, we would like to replace it with AB. And we think that provides our commission with guidance to do this piece of work that we're doing right now of trying to find a way for these two systems to work together. We equally think that if we're going to rely on those results from the voters as indication of preference, that it's fair to look at the tally related to Open Town Meeting and the tally related to Australian ballot and see that the Open Town Meeting vote, there were more yeses and fewer noes than the Australian ballot vote. And so we think that it's appropriate to have, for that reason, in terms of the intentions of the town voters, and for the reason of the efficiency and clarity of the process. So back to the idea that moving a process along with the best probability of having a successful outcome and having a budget that can be implemented on July 1st. For those reasons, we think that a budget rejection at Australian ballot should require a supermajority of no votes. And then related to, that would apply to any of the three options. Related just to the two that go AB, OTM, AB, we think that the rejection of a budget by Australian ballot should not send the process all the way back to the start with the select board. We don't think that there's time for that, frankly. And by warning immediately after such a rejection, by warning the next OTM to consider the budget, there'll be a 30 to 40 day window within which the select board will have an opportunity, and the town staff will have an opportunity to do further work on the rejected budget so as to be able to make a recommendation to the OTM of any changes that town administration would recommend. So that by the time the OTM is held, we're saying basically it doesn't need to go back and start again at the select board. We need to get a meeting warned as soon as possible to keep the process moving. But the select board would have an opportunity during that month to make a new recommendation for OTM to consider. OTM's action would then be immediately after the OTM warned for the next Australian ballot vote on the budget. And for this same reason, that's a recurring theme around having this be as thorough a process as possible, but also a time-efficient process that doesn't lag so as to get to an outcome and be able to implement a budget. If there's a second rejected AB, a second time, this would be like a June or July timeframe for this vote, for the second Australian ballot vote in any given year on the budget. If it's rejected for a second time, we think it ought to then go back to an open town meeting and be back and forth between open town meeting and select board until there's an outcome without another return. So it would be from there on 2 steps in the process rather than 3 steps in the process each time. And that's what there's timelines that are reflective of what I just described that we can go over in more detail if you'd like. They support basically what I've just described, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Just a quick clarifying question, if I can, just because of this, you said back and forth between OTM and the select board, would that still, hypothetical back of the envelope, what you've laid out, that would be the 60% plus 1 or 50%?
Yes, so if it were ultimately approved that 60% plus 1 is required, then that would presume that 2 times, both in April and in June or July, that the outcome at Australian ballot was greater than 60% opposed to the budget. And in that instance, after the second rejection, we do think it needs to go back to the town government. We've used the phrase town government so that it's kind of a town staff, select board, some combination thereof, to be determined by the town staff and the select board rather than by us. In the case of 2 rejections, we think it must go back to town government so that town government has an opportunity to rework what has now been rejected twice and can make a proposal. By then, we're already into a situation where the new fiscal year is starting on last year's budget. And so taking the additional time in the July-August timeframe to actually go back and rework the budget, we think is necessary under those circumstances.
The timelines are just samples, and as you'll see, and we did this based on our conversation with Hillary, that the minimum number of days we need is 30, between 30 and 40 days. So we tried to just, it's more to show how it would work and how far we can get in the process before we get past July 1st. You know what I mean? So we can go through the process once and still stay in April or May,
Right.
even when we started in March. It's when, if a budget is rejected and we have to do it a second time, is when we get back into the issue where it's past July 1st,
Under some circumstances.
under some circumstances.
One other thing I think is worth noting, if we do refer to these sample timelines as we have the discussion, they are using the real dates for town meeting day, the real day for town meeting day, and then all the other dates play off of that starting point. But the real day for town meeting day of March 7th, 2028, is used as sort of the given for this. And it's important to note that that means this is the latest possible calendar for any of the 7, right? We could have a town meeting day on March 1st or on March 7th or any of the days in between. We will, over the years, have all of those different things happen. And this is the example of the latest of any of the possible ways of this occurring. So the fact that this one does take us into July on I think 2 of the 3 alternatives, again, different people can have different opinions about how much of a problem that is. That's a thing to weigh for sure. But it's also, there will be years when that isn't the case, even in a time when there's 2 budgets, because the reason that July 11th shows up as the time for the second AB vote in those scenarios is because the week prior on Tuesday is July 4th. So in years where, let's say it's the 2nd of March is town meeting day, so that's 5 days earlier than March 7th. So 5 days earlier than July 4th is actually still in June for there to be another AB vote that could possibly provide approval. And it's last minute, but it would still be an approved budget before the town enters the new fiscal year.
And just so people know why there are 2 March examples, the first one is March 18th, 2028, which is the second Saturday after the first Tuesday, which is the preferred date that the town clerk's office would love to do a town meeting. We also ran March 11th, the first Saturday, which is the first Saturday after the first Tuesday, so we could see another example of March. And then we have the flipped. And I just want to make it really clear to everybody, we only go into May or June or May or July if the budget is rejected, if this, you know what I mean? If the select board's budget and the OTM budget is rejected. Otherwise, it's done in April.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Where the third, what I'll call the third example.
Mm-hmm.
You have activator could be by a fixed rule. That's where you have the 60 plus 1.
Mm-hmm.
How do you envision that vote taking place? I know when I saw that, I was reminded that in years past, RTM sometimes did votes by ballot. For example, on borrowing money or moving, the big one was moving the police station. Is that how you envision figuring out how you get to 60 plus 1?
Not how I was envisioning. This could be accomplished by just standing up for yay and standing up for nay, but it also could be done.
The reason why I asked is because several people have said to me that they like OTM and they like voting on the budget, but because they're business people, and I think we've heard this in the past also, because they're business people, they're afraid or they're fearful that their vote will be taken in a way that would affect their business. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but if they feel that way, that's the way they feel. So I would say that if we do an activator, and I have to say that I'm leaning toward that option, that it should be like paper ballot.
We should say the timelines don't reflect an activator, don't reflect the third option at all. They reflect two different possibilities for the second option.
Yeah.
Because the third option, other than in the scenario that is possible, depending on how our conversation goes,
That's
around
something
that would be
rejected.
activated by an action of town meeting, the likelier activator would be a petition, whether that's a 10-day petition or a 30-day petition. And in either case, it depends on the timing of the petition and the certifying of the petition and then the warning of the meeting. I mean, there's an unknown aspect to that timeline that made it impossible for us to put one.
Yeah, that's why I would be in favor, if we go with that option, to have an activator. I mean, there can always be a request for, we have petition requests in the charter.
We do, again, because we have a limited amount of time to get to July 1st, the second option would move this process along to a ballot in a certain and more efficient period of time. If we left it to the uncertainty of the third option, we will more often bump up against the July 1st deadline.
Maybe we can combine the second and third options.
Yeah, I think Kate and I definitely make no representation that there isn't a fourth and a fifth and a 10th. I mean, in this conversation, we expect that there'll be some morphing that'll occur, that it won't necessarily be picking one of these, but these are a starting point for the conversation.
Hannah,
I feel like we're treating this conversation like we're already considering one of these three, and I know you said we're not, but I think there are logistical and legal issues with all of these that need to be addressed before we can start talking about whether or not there's an activator. I mean, there's already a procedure under state law and our charter as it exists now to do an Australian ballot after an open town meeting. And I just don't see why we need to make things more complicated. And some of these suggestions, I mean, I don't want to just immediately jump into this, but stuff like saying OTM has to pass a budget, you're infringing on people's constitutional right to vote how they want. I mean, it could even be argued to be like you can't force people to vote yes. I'm so baffled that I feel like for years we've been talking about ways to make voting more accessible, make town government easier to access, and this seems like a step in the wrong direction. And I am very concerned that we're headed down a road where one of these is the only thing that's gonna, that there's no consideration of whether or not this is even an appropriate thing to do both. And I would really like to have that conversation, and I feel like I just don't want to get into the nitty gritty of which of these is best, because quite frankly, I don't think any of these are best.
yeah, and I hear you, and I think, we do have something in the petition, in the charter about referendum, or not referendum, well, whatever it is, reconsideration.
Petition for reconsideration.
But that requires 425 signatures. Do you know what I mean? So I think we're making it almost impossible for somebody who wants the budget to go to Australian ballot vote to do that. And I think this is just like, on that point, we did have this vote in March, and I don't think it's right to tell people you have to go get 425 signatures in order to have an Australian ballot vote on a budget. So that's sort of where I am on yes, it says something in our charter about being able to reconsider something at town meeting, but is it based on the vote that we had in March? Is that the appropriate thing to tell people? Well, you gotta go out and get 425 signatures, you
Well,
know?
why wouldn't, I feel like the easy option then would be to say, let's just lower that threshold. Instead of creating this system where there's suddenly 2 votes, it's extra work for staff, it's extra work for voters to be able to understand, and
Well, that's one of the options is the activator. And is one of the activators saying you need to get, there need to be 50 people that sign a petition? I don't think, that's one of our things, is talking about what you're talking about.
And the January option actually doesn't require a second AB at all. There's already going to be an election on town meeting day. So if there was an OTM in January followed by the town meeting day election that would also include voting on the budget, then it's actually not even an extra step in the process. So, and I want to reiterate, we don't think these are the only 3 things. We think that there's a more complicated conversation to be had. But embedded within these, I think, are, from our perspective at least, ways to balance the work that we'd already done, the system we'd already developed, and the work that we did over 2.5 years together, and with the public during that 2.5 years, also, especially during the final year of it. And as Kate said, the results of the election in March. There was an election in March. There were months of run-up to that with a very active community dialogue around pros and cons of different systems. And we landed in this challenging place of both of the alternatives being preferred by a decent margin. And so it's a fair place for you to land personally in a different place than that and say, as you did last time, you continue to think that what we put together last August is the right system. I totally respect that. And I think we need to have a conversation around these other options and the things that we haven't named that might spin off of one or another or come as an entirely different idea. But without having the consideration of how to try to make one of these work, we're disrespecting the outcome of the March election.
I fundamentally disagree that is what that vote said. It didn't. I can tell you, I voted, and that's not what my vote said, and that's not how I think a lot of people think that their vote would be considered. It's if you want to consider it that way, I think the only thing we can take away is that there are now 2 pending diametrically opposed charter provisions before the legislature, and there is no RTM. That's all we can know. We can't say that everyone wants both. That just because both passed, but this is assuming that everyone wants both, and that's what we need to do.
I'd like to say one more thing, and I'm going to be quiet so we don't just get into an argument here, but not suggesting everyone wants both. I'm suggesting that a majority of the voters on March 3rd said yes to OTM, and a majority of the voters on March 3rd said yes to AB. And that's driving our desire to try to have a system that is combining these 2 pieces to make them work. Another alternative, if we land either on our own or with community input in a place that can't reconcile that, another alternative is for us to take another hiatus and ask the select board to warn a vote so that the people get this time, instead of separate questions of yes or no on 2 different things, would you prefer this one or would you prefer that one? And have a vote that would provide a more clear outcome. I think that it would, and I'm seeing someone in the audience say 3, so perhaps putting RTM back also into the mix, but pick one of the 3. I'm not suggesting that. In fact, my concern for that is the sort of civic welfare of the town. I think that we've been through a lot. I think we got to an outcome. I think us trying to respect that outcome and make something work here is the way forward. If we can't find that way forward, then perhaps what we ought to do is warn a vote where it's pick the one you want and get a clear outcome.
When we had special town meeting, special RTM, was it 2 years ago? And there was a petition for a vote on the ordinance. Did that require 400
Yes.
signatures?
Yes.
And they had no trouble getting that number of signatures. So I'm not sure the number of signatures is a barrier, although I might be in favor of lowering that number.
I think it's a totally different situation because there was a petition circulated asking for us to have our town meeting by Australian ballot. And then we had one open town meeting.
No,
So-
I'm talking about,
No, I'm explaining why I think the barrier has to be less than getting 425 signatures for the
Oh,
people
yeah, I
who want
don't-
to buy Australian ballot.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair to say you gotta get 425
no,
signatures.
I was just asking
Yeah.
whether they got
Yeah.
400,
They
and
did.
they did.
They did.
So, but I would be in favor of lowering the
Mhm.
number.
Mhm.
And I think I would be in favor of lowering the number for any request for either referendum or open town meeting.
Okay, does anyone in the public want to give us your opinion? Frank, and if you can, state your name for the minutes and for BCTV.
Sure, Fritz Bright, District 9. I would like to say there's been a lot of assumptions made here, especially with regard to the result of the vote and earlier with the result of the poll that you guys took that many of us were completely unaware of. I'm not the only one who's looked at the numbers from the votes and talked to people and discovered that many people were extremely confused by the collection of questions on the last town meeting ballot. The first question, being phrased in the negative, would likely have gone the other way had it been phrased in the positive. A remarkable number of people reported afterwards that they did not understand that by voting yes, they were voting against RTM. So that's first. Second, the number of people who voted yes, yes, yes on those was a bigger number based on statistical analysis of the numbers. There were over 500 people on both of the last two questions who voted for both. And the people, several of us have talked to who did that, did not understand the issue. Genuinely did not understand it. So I think the cleanest answer is the one that just got mentioned, which is to put out a really clean question that involves the three choices in the affirmative in every case with a meaningful education effort about what the different options mean. And as a longtime RTM member, I was not aware of what we were giving up by going to OTM. And there's a remarkable number of different things that we gave up this year in terms of the power of the voter, including apparently the power to impanel finance review committee, which I was rather surprised by. And I don't believe that's the only thing. There are some other things in the back of my mind as well that I noticed, but that's a big one.
It's in the charter.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to make too.
fixed
So,
that.
I don't disbelieve that, but what I'm saying is that
this year and next year, we're without the opportunity for the voters to elect the finance committee members. But beyond that, if the recommendations in our proposed charter changes are approved, then it would be actually not a town meeting action, but a ballot. People would, just like running for select board or some other office, they would get signatures, they get on the ballot, and the people of the town would choose who's on the finance committee.
Can I just make one other
Oh, yeah.
point? Was originally, before these petitions came up, our plan was to present the vote to discontinue RTM likely at the same time as our proposed charter, so there wouldn't have been this gap that we're experiencing now, but that was due to factors out beyond our control.
I understand that.
And one last clarification, and I don't think it was your intention, but what you said is a clear ballot that would have each phrased in the affirmative. And I just want to say again, I don't think personally that moving to another vote of the town, at least without a solid effort to try to make some kind of a combined system work, I don't think that's in our collective best interest. But if we do it, it can't be naming each of the three in the affirmative. It needs to be pick one of the three.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think we're saying.
Otherwise, yeah, I thought we were too, but I just want to make sure that's clear in the record,
Not three
because
separate
otherwise
budgets,
we're not
not three
gaining
separate
anything by going
budgets.
back to the polls.
No, but three choices. Yes.
Anyone else?
Dina Chadwick. So I've been loosely following this and, I own a business and I talk to a lot of people all the time. And most recently, my kids have grown up and I can be more involved, which is great. One of the things that I could not be involved with is sit in open town meeting all day long. And now I can, which I'm happy to do as my civic duty. But I talk to so many people and they can't do it. They want to do it, they want to know what's going on, but their lives are too busy. They're raising kids, they're working 2 jobs, they just don't have the capacity. So I think that there was 3 things on the article. I mean, the facts show 1 failed and 2 passed. So we need to honor everyone that voted. And whether I can talk to say, oh, well, so-and-so didn't say that, they misunderstood it. I can say that. I can come up here and be like, oh, they didn't understand it. But the facts say what they say. You can read it and you can clearly see yes or no on this. So we have 2 things that the town said, yes, we want. So we need to work hard. I know change, everyone's like, oh, change. We don't want change, it's too hard. That's the only thing that's constant in life is change, and we gotta do the work. And I really appreciate all of you guys getting together and hashing it out, but we gotta get this right. We gotta have both, and what that looks like to me would be an open town meeting earlier, inform everybody, and then everything that is a vote goes on the Australian ballot. Anything that's monetary, like that affects people's bottom line and their community, has to go on an Australian ballot. Because you can have people at home watching the open town meeting, they can get educated, they don't have to participate, they can chime in and chime out if they want to, but this is what needs to be done. Both of them passed, we need to move forward, we gotta pull up our sleeves and do the hard work to make it happen for all of our community. And I think that will really bring us all together. Thank you.
I expect this mic is live, maybe not. Timothy Belknap, downtown resident, taxpayer, and voter. First, I'd like to just respectfully disagree with the specious interpretation of the voting results, right? Your team here, you put an amazing amount of work, enormous amount of work into reaching this point. And I understand the desire to finally push this across the finish line. But ignoring the voices of 2,300 residents at your own peril, a majority of who supported Australian ballot and open town meeting. If those voices are dismissed, I believe this proposal will be voted down and all of this work will be for nothing. A proposal that only allows Australian ballot if 60% plus 1 person at open town meeting approves does not honor the will of the people either. To my ears, holding the open town meeting in January, followed by an Australian ballot, makes the most sense, both financially and from a timing standpoint. It gives residents the opportunity to fully debate the issue while ensuring everyone has an equal opportunity to vote. Thank you.
Hi, Tom Grasso. First of all, thank you for all the time that you guys have been putting in. It's been quite a long haul, and I just get a sense from your faces that you're kind of done with it, and I can understand it. I also think that Brattleboro has a tendency to be a very deliberative kind of place. I mean, it took us how many years to put a skateboard park in? And this is even more complicated than that, you can imagine. So I appreciate that. I do think, and I've listened to a lot of this and contributed some. We're faced now in a political climate where people are trying to limit the ability of people to vote. And there's a recent, court executive order by the current federal administration trying to limit the ability of mail-in ballots. So I think the fact that a majority of the people voted for Australian ballot and open town meeting means that more people want to be more involved. And I think Dina makes a really important point. Just because you can't go to the open town meeting doesn't mean you don't have a right to vote. And I don't think that giving more power to fewer people to vote is the way we should be going in this day and age. So I think an open town meeting where if you want to have an advisory vote that goes back to the select board to say, not 27 million, but 26 million, but I don't think the OTM should be vested with the actual authority to either vote up or vote down the budget. That should be the select board and then presented to the entire voting population. So I do think that option one is the simplest, most straightforward if you limit the vote of OTM to basically an advisory vote. And an advisory vote could be make some changes here, make some changes here if the budget can work. I think Hannah makes some important points about the fact that we need to work out how this is going to actually function and all that. But I do think that it's pretty clear what the public wanted in the last vote. And you can say you didn't understand the vote, but that means you just didn't read the vote very carefully. So I would encourage you guys to keep doing your work. I appreciate all the time you put into it. So thank you.
I want Hillary.
Hillary Francis, town clerk. I think that I'm not advocating one way or another for any of these. I think y'all have done a lot of work. And I think, like Hannah said, it doesn't have to be one of these, and you all have said that as well. I think there are pros and cons to all of them, and you took a lot of my thoughts and put them in your backup materials. I think that hearing you all speak, hearing the public speak, the results can be interpreted in a million different ways. And I think that it's hard and fast say, this is what the results mean. Because we don't know what the results mean. It could mean anything that you want them to mean, as we're hearing, based on your preference. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that we can't know hard and fast what those results mean with the way that the questions were put on the ballot because of petitions. They legally had to be put on that way, and that was a challenge for the voters and for the interpretation of what those votes mean. No matter what you all decide, no matter what the community advises, I would strongly request that you don't go with the first Saturday after the first Tuesday. It is logistically really, really challenging for our office, and we are tasked with pulling all of this off. We can pull almost anything off. We can be magicians, but especially every 4 years, and it will come every 4 years, there's a presidential primary on that first Tuesday. And we have reporting that we have to get done to the state in addition to wrapping up everything, and we just logistically do not have time to accurately print the checklist and do everything that we need to do in time for that Saturday or Sunday. So short of begging, I would please do not do it the first Saturday.
We won't make you beg.
Begging her.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to just go to Jill, who's on Zoom.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, and just introduce yourself for the record.
Jill Stahl Tyler, District 7. Wanted to start by thanking you again. All of you have done a lot of work. It's been a very long haul for you. I know you've done your survey, you've done meetings, you've done input, and then you had petitions and a vote, and you have to try to finagle all of that information into your recommendations. Special to Peter and Kate for really trying hard to lay out some concrete directions that you can all go to. Just my own personal opinion, I got involved with this from the very beginning because I was excited about everybody being able to have a vote. I don't have any other great agenda except that I talked to so many people who say they don't understand what representative town meeting was. They didn't understand why they went to vote on town meeting day, but there wasn't really a town meeting. If you talk to the voters, even as they went to vote, they were like, what exactly is that? So you could look at all sorts of things as you guys are saying and trying to understand who voted what, why. But I think that's kind of the vote. That's what happens when we vote. We have to take the results that are there. And Peter and Kate, you guys have done exactly that. You're looking at how to make a hybrid. I personally love in January, it makes the select board move a little bit faster, but it gives all that input. And I've never been against the input nor the ideas of the civic discussion and having people get to talk directly to each other. This town really values that, and that came out in the vote. But in the bottom, the other part that everybody was saying all along too, not everybody gets to vote if you do it at open town meeting. I've been at representative town meeting for many years. I've been at open town meeting now last year. It's just better if you can have everybody vote. And I like what Tom had to say too, that this is a time when we're losing votes and feeling like things are changing around in the country. I love for Brattleboro to stand up for what I think we're kind of known for, which is having the voice of the people respected and a way to put it out there. And you're coming up with that when you do the hybrid system. And to me, that open town meeting in January, then follow it up, get all of that input back to the select board, let the select board change it over, put it out to Australian ballot. And that Australian ballot will give you a result. If it's rejected, last year representative town meeting rejected it the end of March, and the select board went to work and managed one that was passed in good time. So I didn't know that it was going to be done, but we proved that it could be done last year. So this is completely possible. You put it out in January, have it voted on in early March, send it back to the select board, bring it back out for another vote. Yeah, by Australian ballot again, which is what people are asking for, and you're done. That's it.
Thanks, Jill. Randy? Oh, no, I'm sorry, yeah, Ernie.
Ernie Coughlin, District 7. First of all, thanks. Obviously, this reflects a lot of time, energy, and all that, and it does reflect what the town voted on. I personally am in favor for Australian ballot. I like the first option, number 1. Number 2 would be okay, but I want to address something else. That's your activator and your rejection of 60%. This is not a filibuster. This is everything else that requires a vote. If you, some people get voted on, the select board have done that by 3 votes, 7 votes. Why is this different? I think it needs to be 50%, 51% bounces it or approves it, whichever it is. And everything else has been said. I'm a firm believer in Australian ballot, and I've talked to a lot of people as well. And I think this combination of both really does reflect what the town wants. And again, thank you for all your time and energy in putting this together.
Hi, Randy Blodgett, West Brattleboro. I get it. It's been a lot of work. It's been a long time. It's aggravating. I'm sitting here and trying to put myself in a few of your places, and I get some of it I don't get. Hey, Plan 1 or version 1 is what I brought up the last meeting. I agree we don't need a filibuster activator. It should just be simple majority. It's Australian ballot. That's what people want. That's what people voted for. I know the reasoning, you know, I get why that's in there or why you proposed it. I don't agree with it. Votes aren't meant to be interpreted 10 ways to Sunday. It's very simple. 1 lost, 2 won. 2 are at the state legislature. You know, here's where we are. You were put in this position to recommend something. The select board has to approve it. You know, in the end, all the citizens that want to vote are going to vote yes or no. And, you know, right now, if we don't have that, I'm going to be voting no. I don't want to vote no. I want to move this forward. I want to get to where it's both of these things like I think it can be, I think it should be. And why are we afraid of more people voting? That's the thing I keep going back to. It's not, you know, everybody should be able to vote. You want to go to Open Town Meeting, you can. I will. You know, I did last time. I went to RTM, got elected. But hey, everybody has to be allowed to vote. We shouldn't be afraid of this. There's nothing wrong with letting people vote. I mean, that's part of our rights in this country. Let's give the people a right to vote. Don't be afraid of more people voting. So I hope you approve 1 without the 60% threshold. It's a simple majority. And I do want to work with the town so that we don't have any, you know, problems of creating more chaos or more shortages of time for staff. So whatever we have to do to make all that happen, hey, let's figure it out. We do have time. We can move the schedule around. Change is hard, but let's do some change. Thank you.
Can I say?
Oh, yeah, Maya.
I would just like to say that everybody seems to be saying, everybody voted for Australian ballot. And the totals are 1362 for Australian ballot and 1457 for Open Town Meeting.
But that doesn't mean anything. All it means is both passed. That's all that vote was meant to show. Is
Not necessarily. You
yeah,
said
it is.
people voted.
Legally, that's all it is. It's a petition. It was voted yes. Period.
But more people
Everybody's
voted.
trying to armchair quarterback, and that's not the purpose of the petition.
I'm just
I
saying.
helped.
But we can't talk over each other. We don't want to talk over each other.
I'm just saying that more people voted yes for Open Town Meeting than they voted for Australian ballot. Now, I don't know what that means, and I'm not trying to say what it means. I am just pointing out the vote totals. Okay, so I wish people would stop saying people voted for Australian ballot. Yes, they did, but they also voted for Open Town Meeting.
And that's what this does.
Yeah, just make,
The
yeah,
first
yeah,
and
wait.
second.
I just want to make a quick correction to something Randy said, which is that our charter does not have to be pre-approved by the select board. It goes directly to the voters.
So then why were we told at previous meetings by the old select board that you were like, see, can we go back and do that? Because I thought that
There's
Sat in
multiple
multiple-
ways for the petition to get before the voters, but this commission, we have a special procedure by where ours can go directly to the voters, but it would have gone directly to RTM, but now that there's no RTM, it would go directly to an Australian ballot vote.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Yes, Hillary.
And I just have a question on that. And I might totally misunderstand this, and I'm not an attorney, but is it the case that it's sort of assumed that it has to be approved by the select board because the select board are the ones who have to warn it? And if they refuse to warn it, then it doesn't go to the voters. Is that, I don't know if that's right, but I just want to.
I mean, I think that the select board probably would have to, I mean, yeah, I think that they would have to warn the vote, but under our charter, the charter commission is allowed to put together its own charter proposal and put that to the voters.
without change from the select board, because we were told by the old select board that they could do like,
Well,
so
we
just.
were going under a different, we were trying to go under a different method so that it would go to a townwide vote instead of to representative town meeting, but now there's no representative town meeting, and Bob couldn't be here tonight, but he'd be happy to come to our next meeting and clarify that under the town attorney's interpretation of the statutes, that provision is still effective and it would just go to an Australian ballot vote.
Peter.
I'm interested in hearing Bob's opinion about that, because that comes as a surprise to me, because I thought that the direct route to the voters was lost as one of the things that happened when RTM got eliminated, was that our work, initially there was, under the charter as it's currently written, when we had RTM, called for the work of the Charter Review Commission to be voted on by the RTM. Because the place that we landed after all that consideration was to propose elimination of RTM and switch to OTM, we had made a decision that we would take our proposal to the select board and ask the select board to warn the vote of the people, because it was a weird thing and it felt like a not necessarily appropriate thing to go to RTM and say, shall RTM be discontinued? So we were going voluntarily to the board. You're right that you heard from individual members of the prior select board that they had an intention to make changes of things that they didn't like where we landed. I believe that the select board ought to, and I am hopeful that this select board will, just view their role as a ministerial duty. That this body was convened 3.5 years ago to do the work that we've done. And we paused long enough to have the vote occur. We've heard the vote. We're working through, as challenging as it may be, the process of like taking that vote and bringing it into our work or deciding not to. We'll see where we land. But we're in that moment now. We're hearing from you some more about it. We're going to get to a place. And I think it is incumbent, and we'll say so to the select board when the time comes, incumbent upon the select board to respect that they have the authority to warn a vote of the people on this, and we don't have that authority, I don't think, unless Bob points out something I'm not aware of. But the select board shouldn't presume to impose its own opinion on the document that has come from this, long and intense process of public engagement by the people who were appointed for this purpose. I think the select board has a ministerial duty to take the recommendations that we ultimately make and put them up, for better or for worse, to a vote of the people.
We want at least me, I shouldn't speak for everybody, I want the citizens of the town of Brattleboro to vote on our charter. I don't want 5 select board members who have not been engaged in it. I'm not putting a charter together for 5 select board members. I'm trying to put a charter together for 12,000 people. I'm just gonna go to Neil because he's been waiting. If that's okay, is anyone else?
Okay. Did that work?
Yes, and if you can introduce yourselves for the
Okay, thank you.
public.
My name is Neil Manders, and I am voting for the most remote input to your meeting, as I am calling you from the terminal station in Eugene, Oregon. So, you know how important this is to be sitting in a terminal and attending a local meeting. First of all, I really do appreciate all the work you guys have done. And over the last 2 years, I've been fairly active around town, trying to either get some votes for individuals or to vote for the one person, one vote. And if everybody that I talk to basically seems to be interested in a ballot vote, they want to have a vote and what's going on. And for many of them, they're either confused about what used to be RTM or OTM, and they really don't know what's going on with that, but a vote is plain and simple and clear for them. So I would highly urge you folks, I don't know how you're going to do it because I haven't got all the materials with me, but I know you can do it, that you could go with a pure hybrid situation and make it so that people in town have this opportunity for discussion and comments, and then an opportunity to do a yes/no vote on a total budget. So thank you for listening, and I hope I can get there within the next 24 hours.
Yeah. And who else is on Zoom?
Alyssa.
Oh, okay, get Alyssa. I only can see a little box of a face.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for your time. Alyssa, Royal District 9. I just wanted to chime in and say that I am in favor of Australian ballot. I don't know if any of you recall that at this past Open Town meeting, I requested private vote, private ballot voting twice. And the second time I did so, someone actually asked the moderator if they could reverse that decision and not have private ballot vote. So I question that. Okay. I question the motive behind that. Mostly I feel as though, frankly, it's no one's business how I vote. It's no one's business how anybody in this town votes. We live in pretty much a cancel culture. And I think that when people aren't voting privately and we're putting it out there publicly, there's the potential to create an us versus them kind of mentality. And it can really perpetuate division in our community. I think that we have a right to keep our votes private. And I just think that's something that should be considered in all of this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go Spoon and then we'll go back to Tom. Spoon, you haven't spoken, so you get to speak. Yes.
My turn?
Yes. If you could introduce yourself for the viewers.
Spoon Agave. One change I'd like to see is the whole thing reorganized so the select board is elected in November at the regular election day, so we can count on a much higher participation, so people can run when they aren't freezing their fingers off. And so that's one. I do hope, I always worry when I hear talk about the select board because this has nothing to do with the select board. This is, you are a committee of the people of this town. You are doing our work. And you have no obligations at all to the select board. Their only role was to appoint and to reappoint if there's a vacancy or something. I do hope you'll examine very carefully all the statements. I think that's one of the things we lack here, and just about everywhere. You know, I find it hard when I hear a statement that people can't come because they don't have the time, and I say to myself, when you know something is going to happen a year in advance, or in this case it could be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years in advance, because it's always, the town meeting has always been on a certain day, how you could say, sorry, I know 3 years from now on that date I will be too busy, I won't be able to attend town meeting. I also wonder when I hear we just went through what is probably arguably the most impactful election since RTM was created 65 years ago. And interestingly, with all that, with all the news and the play and the writing, if I'm not mistaken, Hillary, 2% of the electorate less than the year before voted. So there shouldn't be any assumptions about what the people want, about what everything requires a very thoughtful question of how do we know this is true? And be able to find some evidence. If you don't have evidence, you need to admit that it's just a feeling. And be able to say, we chose to go this way or that way because it was our feeling, we really don't know. So, but I hope it's never that way. I hope you can always show a good, logical, solid argument for everything you do. There's also a misnomer, but I understand where it comes from, because in our public schools, what we are inundated with, and only inundated with, is that a democracy is the right to vote. But you know, in the Soviet Union, they'd often get turnouts of 90 and 95%. Seems strange, Well, actually, all the local city district elections and all that, they had elections for local people. And as long as you were a registered member of the Communist Party, you could vote. You were expected to vote. Aha. And it was only one party. It was simple, but sometimes a person could run who was not a member of the party. But there was only one party. So I say these things to begin to show you that there is far more to a democracy than just voting. In fact, voting itself can kill, if that's your only definition, it will kill a democracy if, more important than anything else, and this is what I hope you focus on, there has to be an informed vote. It doesn't matter if 100% turn out. If that 100% doesn't have the right information, it's going to be a bad decision. And so, more than anything else that preserves a democracy is an informed electorate. And so, in your deliberations, I hope you're always thinking, what can we do to improve the information that gets out to people? It's not clear. I think if you go back and listen to all of the town meetings we have had, and listen to what people stand up and say, and the statements that are made with great confidence, this is the truth. And in fact, under closer examination, it's not. But you need the time and the ability and the place and the desire to make sure that every statement that you're willing to put forward or back up or propose can be defended logically, according with a democratic structure. A democracy essentially is rule of the people. It implies all the power belongs to the people, but it is also, from the very first supposedly, we look at the moment in the history of democracy, the Magna Carta, when the peasants surrounded the king on Runnymede, I think it was, or something. That was all about securing the rights of people, of putting limits on the rights of the king and the royalty. And all of democracy is built around that premise. It exists to protect and to preserve and to create the rights of people. And but we have, all right, I'll stop. But we have to also have a successful democracy. And that harks back to a lot of other elements, like being in control of the agenda. If you're told what to do, what to talk about, it's not your meeting. And all sorts of other elements, and I would hope you would all take the time to look through the internet, wherever you go, to study and look up what are the elements of a successful democracy. Thank you.
Janet, and then,
One second.
and then Tom, you're next.
So, Janet Therese, I don't know if I'm 7 or 9. I don't know that it matters. I'm somewhere. I'm going to say the same thing that I've said since the very beginning of this, is that we are hopefully opening up the system so that shift workers and people who are very busy can participate. I know somebody who's not here tonight because they're a shift worker. They couldn't be here. You know, these are the people that can't like dedicate hours and hours of their time to all of these meetings. I appreciate the idea of trying to incorporate an open town meeting with the Australian ballot, but I know people who cannot be here, and we know them in common, by the way, because I chat with people like out in the stores, and they could not come to the last open town meeting because they needed to keep their business open. if we want to open up our town so that we have, you know, more people involved, more people voting, more people interested, and more people informed, then we need to open up the vote. That's the only way to do it. It's the only way is to feel like that, you know, if I vote, I'm going to make a difference. If we shut out the voters from the system, if we shut them down from an open town meeting and just say, well, it's just the people that have the luxury, who can plan their schedules, they're not coming. You know, I beg people to come tonight, and they cannot dedicate this kind of time. But they care, and they live here in Brattleboro, and they want to vote. Anyway, that's what I've been saying since the very beginning, and that's the end of my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Tom can
I'll be very brief.
finish it off.
Kate, you said something very passionately about what you would like to see the electorate do for the Charter Commission's recommendations, and that you want all voters in Brattleboro to vote for it. And I completely agree with that. And I would just say we want to apply the same principle to the budget every year. I look around the room, and I'm you know, one of the older people in town, just like most of us here tonight, and some of us have time to do these sorts of things, but there's a lot of young people with families who don't. They have just as much right and interest in what the town is doing and deciding, and they have just as much right as I do, just because I can stand up here and talk, but they can't. And so I think that's the basic principle. I couldn't be at the last OTM because I was away traveling for work, and I could have had it on my calendar for 3 years. And it's still, I got called to a job that I had to do. So I just don't think it's realistic to suggest that everybody can go to OTM and express their votes, their right to vote. And this is not about democracy as a whole. This is about how we vote on things in town. There's a number of other things that the town does that are about democracy, but that's not what this is about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. One more time, Timothy, then I want to have a conversation right here.
Timothy Belknap, downtown resident, voter, and taxpayer. Just want to say, the great Marxist C.L.R. James once wrote, "Every cook can govern." And I want to take exception to the idea that an RTM or an OTM with 2% of the population is somehow knows better than anyone else. And I think each individual in this town deserves to have that vote in the future of the town. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. I think,
Ask Hillary a question.
oh yeah, go right ahead.
Hillary,
Yes.
what is the average percentage of voter turnout? Do you have any idea?
Well, I have a whole spreadsheet in my office. And I think it depends. Are you talking about town meeting? Are you talking about August state primary? Are you talking about November general election? Are you
I'm talking about town meeting.
I think we've seen anywhere from 13 to 30. But I don't know the average off the top of my head. I would really need to, if we take a break at some point, I can run downstairs and pull that up, or I can run downstairs now and.
Now,
and
you
pull
can
the spreadsheet.
let us know next time.
Sure.
That's fine.
And just in case I can't be here, I'll email it to Kate.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
that's fine. I was just curious. I know presidential elections are higher.
Yes, and it also depends sometimes, right, if it's a presidential primary year, you're gonna see turnout for town meeting day higher. Because people are turning out for the presidential primary, versus a non-presidential primary. And you'll see, right, some years are like, I think last year, like Spoon said, it was 2% higher than this year, even though both years were controversial with some hot button issues. So I'll email a spreadsheet to Kate so that y'all can do what you will with the data.
Curiosity more than
It's
anything.
basically like Hillary was saying, and it's in the 60s generally for some of those other events, just as a number to put out there,
In the
what we're
60s.
talking about.
No.
60-some%
For the November generals.
Yeah, for those, yeah.
Versus what, 3,000 over 9,000, so roughly 30%.
as a
For-
high number of turnout.
Yeah,
That's a
for
very high
the
turnout
March,
for
right?
March. Yeah.
Versus Open Town Meeting, which is what, 300 people?
We've had one, we don't have a very good sample size for that.
Yeah, fair
So we
enough.
have-
Okay, so my question for us up here is not which one of these do we wanna pick and what combination of what, or how do we wanna maneuver all this? But do we want to, we have open town meeting in our charter now, do we wanna add the Australian ballot component? Then we can decide, if we decide we wanna add the Australian ballot component, then we can figure out how to add an Australian ballot component. I'm happy to start and say my opinion has not changed from the last meeting, that I believe we need to add an Australian ballot component. I think we need to add it because we heard from the people in March. I also think we need to add it because there's two bills sitting up in the legislature. One saying Brattleboro wants open town meeting, and one that says Brattleboro wants Australian ballot. And I don't want the Vermont legislature making a decision for the people of Brattleboro on what our form of town government is. So I think for me, it's important for two reasons that we take a stab at figuring out how we can do an Australian ballot and an open town meeting. That is me, but we all need to decide together if we move forward with trying to figure out the Australian ballot piece. So I don't know who wants to go next.
I'm in agreement with you. I feel like that would make the most people satisfied.
And it's okay not to agree with me. I just want to put that out there. I just haven't changed my mind since last week. We all are individuals, so I want people to feel comfortable not agreeing with me.
I'm happy to take a stab at it. I am still trying to process, especially given some more meat on the bones. I have concerns about, and I know we're not like nitpicking at this point because it's not a given, concerns about other concerns that aren't listed. I'm wrestling with what makes it different enough. Like, so I'm also, as we're jumping back into this, hybrid now means something different than it meant in August. Hybrid now means, because Australian ballot has existed and would have continued to existed in the draft that we are putting forward, hybrid now means something else. And that is a mental.
That's why I don't call it hybrid.
Right, it's a conceptual map change, which is not a problem, but it does mean something different. And if, again, the educational portion and the bringing folks up to speed, the argument in August or in the summertime is not the argument today. It is, our budget is complicated. And I'm not saying anyone can't handle that. I'm not saying the education can't happen. The pass-through things that have to happen that could fail and not get a recall, right? Like, it is, there are concerns that I think, and I think OTM is good. I am wrestling with this real hard. And I don't wanna nitpick the options in front of us to get to like a conclusion or something, I don't know. It is I do not take lightly what we're hearing and the consideration. So I can't like firmly say, and I hope I can articulate myself with more words soon, but I don't want to be like, yes, I like, because maybe I would consider wrestling through the details, because the devil's in the details, but at this point, we are not wrestling with the details. So if the question is just to pursue this other path or do OTM, I am really struggling.
Now, let me ask you something. Do you think, and you might not know the answer to this, but is fleshing out some more of the details help you decide or not? Like, is it what goes to the voters is of concern to you? Like, what is it? And you don't have to answer. I'm just trying to figure out a way. How would we help you figure out what you're comfortable with? You know what I mean?
I would, of course, love to hash out every single one. I don't know that that's a great use of our time. And
I just want to figure out if there's some way to like help you figure out like what is that we might be able to answer or work through to have you go either way. I'm not saying to push you over to going to Australian ballot. I'm saying what would help you. And you don't have to answer that this second, but think about like what is it that eventually can help you figure out.
Yeah.
Something like that.
For the moment. For the moment.
Yeah. Some of my cards are on the table, and based on some of the communication we've had tonight and the conversation that we had that led to this, what we had 2 weeks ago, that led to the fact that we even put this information together and had this conversation tonight. I don't think what I'm about to say is going to surprise anybody, but I want to say it, and I want to say it particularly. I want to be clear to those who have come tonight and spoken to us that I want to articulate a way in which I see something really fundamentally different from what most of, it's kind of a theme that's emerged from what most of you have said. And so I want to be clear about something I see different and be equally clear about how strongly I feel, even though in the vote on March 3rd, it was not what I personally preferred, how strongly I feel that we ought to include Australian ballot. And I think we ought to include it in a meaningful manner with the authority of the vote of the people to, and the outcome of this process. It's very important. That's a true, clear, unequivocal statement from me, even though it's not what I personally preferred. I think that it's based on what we've been through in the last year in our community and based on the March 3rd vote, I think it's the right thing to do. And what I heard, not from every one of you, but from several of you, and it was kind of embedded in the theme that I heard from advocates for the Australian ballot this evening, several people said flat out, the OTM ought to be advisory. And I just want to be really clear, I disagree with that. I don't think that accurately represents that, just as much as some of us are struggling hard to come up with a solution that we don't personally love, but we think is the right thing to do because of trying to be responsive and respectful of the outcome on March 3rd. Equally, I think it's disrespectful of the outcome on March 3rd to say that the 1,400 voters, the even larger majority who voted for OTM as compared to AB, did so because they want to have conversation that will help the AB voters make their choices. I don't think that's what happened. I don't think that's what happened in the dialogue in our community. I don't think that's what the votes mean. Yes, we all can interpret the votes different ways, but again, I think the only way to not try to responsibly interpret the vote is to throw it out and put a clearer question before the people, and I think we should not do that. And so it's important to me that I hope that we do land in a place where we incorporate a real Australian ballot authority into this system. And I hope we do it in a way that retains real OTM authority as well. And that's what drove my recommendation, our recommendation for the, when the larger number of people who are not engaged for all kinds of good reasons and other reasons, everybody has their own reasons, but it's a fact, regardless of the reasons why, it's a fact that the people who are in the OTM are engaged in a dialogue with each other, hearing points of view they don't agree with, participating in ways that say, I don't like that, but if we did it this way, I could support it. That process where we as a community come to something that maybe a larger group of people can live with, I hear loud and clear, both from the results of the vote and from those of you who advocate strongly for AB as the final word, I hear that there are people who can't participate in OTM, and a statistically clearly larger proportion of our community can participate in AB. And so I do think we ought to include it. If we include it in a way that causes the OTM to not be meaningful anymore, I think we've harmed our community, and I think we've disrespected the outcome of the vote. And so my thought about the 60% threshold, not as a activator for holding an AB, I don't like that alternative, but as a threshold that has to be surpassed at the AB in order to reject a budget, is that we have larger participation but less engaged participation at the AB than at the OTM. And if we treat them as though they were equal, there's no incentive anymore for anybody to participate in that more challenging, more engaging, more intense process of wrestling with the stuff to get to the outcome that's going to go onto that ballot. And I think that it also ought to not be the final word, right? So if there is an outcome at OTM that a broad cross-section of the community rejects, then the 60% threshold will be met, and the AB will have used its power to say, no, we don't agree with this budget, send it back, get it reworked. I'm for that now in the fullness of what we've been through for all the reasons we've been talking about. But if OTM is only set up as an opportunity to have a several hour long conversation that may or may not help people make an informed vote when it comes time for the Australian ballot, I'm not for that. I don't think that's what the voters reflected in the choice they made on March 3rd. And I think it would be bad for our local governance. And so, so that the bottom line is I hope that we can land in a place where we do have a real AB piece in here, not anything that is like token consideration of it that would be hard, like a conditional one that requires people to sign petitions is making it hard to actually have a real AB component. I'm not for that. I think it ought to be automatic. And I think it ought to flow from a real meaningful OTM where the business of the town gets done, not just discussed.
Well, I think that we need to figure out, and I have my own ideas, but how to do some kind of hybrid. And I know Kate doesn't like the word.
Can we talk it combined?
Some kind of, all right, combined process. But I think that Open Town Meeting was almost better than RTM had been. I mean, in terms of the discussion, and I think that's very important. And I think that our draft charter, I mean, that's what it reflects. And I would like to see us try to figure out how to include Australian ballots some way. And I will say, as I said last meeting, in our draft, there's more opportunity for Australian ballot votes than there had been in the previous charter.
Which means that it's already in the proposal.
What? I
Could
said
you
that,
explain what was better about, why did you make that statement?
I thought the discussion had more different points of view than there had been in the past. That's all. I
Did
mean,
any more people speak than usual?
I don't know whether it was more people or just more points of view, or, I just thought the discussion was quite lively. Let me put it that way.
That it was.
I just wanna see if Hannah wants an opportunity to.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've made my position pretty clear. I'm not saying that we need to stick exactly with what we had last August, but I think that acting like the results of that vote said anything in particular, or that we have an obligation to make everyone happy is not accurate. Our job is to create a document that allows our town to function effectively, and I understand that it's not going to make everyone happy, but I also think that we need to think about what's best for the town as a municipality, not just what everyone in town wants. Like, just because some people have very, very strong voices one way or the other, doesn't mean that that's what we need to do. And I feel like we spent a lot of time considering Australian ballot, considering RTM, considering OTM, and we came to the conclusion we came to. And hearing the feedback, I mean, I think that I would be open to maybe making it easier to ask for a ballot for reconsideration, so long as then once you get to that point, it is a higher threshold to overturn OTM. But I think that these systems all make things more complicated instead of less complicated, because you're adding an extra step. You are either, like Peter said, discounting the value of someone's vote at RTM, or some of these proposals have it that it just sort of cycles back between OTM and Australian ballot, and I don't really understand logistically how that would work. Like, what ballot what budget are you going back to when it gets rejected? And that seems to me to be taking some power away from the select board to propose a budget. And so I just don't see how these are better for the town just because there are a couple loud voices really pushing for a certain thing to be included. And I think that, to Joy's point, I don't think these are fleshed out enough. I think there's a lot of stuff that would need to be looked at to see if these are even possible. I just think that there's too much uncertainty here, and we spent so much time looking at everything already. And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel and try and jam something in that we looked at and said, no, we don't think that's what's best. And we came up with what I stand by was a good proposal. And I think there are ways that we can tweak it and make adjustments based on what's happened. But I don't think that we can say, first of all, that this is what the people want, or that what the results of those votes mean that we have to do that. And so I would really discourage us from.
You guys, we all have a right to our opinion, so I think
This is actually our committee's work, and the public is allowed to come here and comment, but we're the members of this commission. And so I just really, really, really want to advocate for not trying to turn this into some sort of like Frankenstein's monster of like trying to fit all of these different ideas into something, when what we really need to be doing is making a good, solid foundational document for our town, which I think we've done.
So I think I'm going to take issue with what Peter was saying about the vote. First of all, it was not ranked choice voting, so it doesn't matter how many votes happened for one or the other. Second of all, The ballot on Open Town Meeting was non-specific. It didn't say, I want an Open Town Meeting so I can vote up or down on the budget. The Australian ballot did. And so I think there's a big difference there. I also think that this idea that deliberation happens one day a year is disrespectful to all the other conversations that happen all year long, select board meetings, meetings in a coffee shop, letters to the editor. So I think we need to be realistic about the way that the town really decides things and not make it seem like the only place to decide things is one day a year. Hannah, I think I agreed with everything you were saying about having a good system in place until you said what the commission recommended, because I don't agree with what the commission recommended. Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to not be misunderstood, so I apologize that I'm going to respond directly to that, but you responded directly to me. I totally accept and respect that we might land in different places. I think we are going to land in different places. I know we've come from different perspectives into the conversation tonight around this issue. I think all of those other times when members of the community are engaged with one another around the welfare of the community are important.
Good.
And informative to where each of us individually comes to when it's time to cast a ballot. I think all of that's true. I wouldn't quibble with anything that you said, and I think it's not just true, it's important. And it's different than being in a room where the people in the room that day, through an official governmental process, are empowered to actually make decisions together and to amend the questions that have been placed before us by the smaller number of people who are in positions of authority in our community. And I think that moment is important. It's way not the only important moment of the year, but I think it's really important.
Can I just, so the people that you mentioned, the select board, they're elected by ballot by the public of the town. It's different than sitting in an open town meeting. And I agree, I think those sort of deliberations are important, but they don't necessarily need to be the thing that makes the decisions for the town. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. Yeah, period.
And I think that's why a combined system is important. So we do have at least 4 of us who are willing or interested in considering moving Australian ballot, or at least considering, we didn't vote to put Australian ballot. I want to make sure nobody's misinterpreting what I'm saying, but into maybe discussing further how we do the combined system. And Hannah's right, it's not totally fleshed out because literally Peter and I were talking to a lot of people and saying, here's the way to go. One of the things that we haven't done is talk to like anyone from, whether they're on the select board or the town manager's office, about whether January is even an option. I mean, Peter was a former town manager, I'm a former select board member. You know, whether they can get a budget done by the end of December, my experience is no. That's just my experience, but we have not asked anybody. You know, so that's an option that needs to be explored. If we're serious about moving forward, we can have a serious discussion. I mean, one of the things is we don't get our town audit back until December.
Yeah.
And we don't have, you know, numbers, but, you know, if you want, you know, and I think I can tell you right now, because obviously Peter and I produced this document together, I agree really strongly with him that Open Town Meeting should vote on the budget and pass that budget on to Australian ballot. I think we've done either representative town meeting or now an open town meeting now for 60 whatever years, and it's been really actually quite effective. And then you have the people vote on that. That's where I'm coming down on that. So, but that doesn't mean everybody else has to. I'm just struggling now to figure out how we can, if you want us to flesh some of this out, talk to some more people. Are there, because I know Joy's still trying, you're starting to figure out which way you want to even go. So I'm trying to figure out, is there something that can help you as we move this forward? As we try to figure out if we can land at a place. I mean, we have a willingness by at least 4 of us to try to land at a place where Australian ballot can be part of the process. And if you want, Peter and I to do some more work between now and November 4th or November June. Oh my God, November 4th, June 4th.
It's just next week.
Yeah, just next week. And some of it is talking through, because we have a list of some legal issues that we have to see how it can work. We have that list already.
I don't want to interrupt you. I want to add something and pose a question once you are done talking.
No, I think that's the next thing is where do we take this, since we do have a willingness from 4 of us to at the very least see how we can make a combined system. We've taken a step from last week. We've moved a little bit from last week, the last meeting, where we weren't even sure we wanted to even take the next step to go to a combined system. So Peter and I brought this to you folks, and now we've moved a step on, there is a willingness to consider it, and I'm not taking this as that anybody is supporting it. I'm just saying there's a
No, I think we
willingness.
need to think about it and maybe flesh out some things. I mean, I have a whole lot of questions about various alternatives, some of which are just very practical, like basketball season.
And some
for
of these
example.
things would be really helpful if we could leave tonight with what this, not come back next week and you tell us this stuff.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point I was gonna make. I'm worried, I would like to further consider this. Not this exactly. I would like to further consider the topic, and I would like to consider it with more substance in front of us around the potential ways to make this happen. And I think we set ourselves up for failure if we try to do that next week. A week from tonight leaves us like the next couple of days to try to actually do anything different with this. And I think that we do need to have some communication with people inside town government. I think we also need to have some communication with people at the school district around the possibility of like, what can they accommodate? If they know a year ahead of time, for instance, of when we're gonna be wanting to use the gym, could they accommodate it by like not having a home game that weekend? So I see you shaking your head, but I'd like to.
I've just had those conversations with them.
Yeah.
And they were very clear.
I understand. And that fellow reports to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to the board. So I respect where we've landed. I'm not quibbling that you've got a clear answer. And I think that if we're as a community trying to make something very challenging and complicated happen, maybe the school can be more of a partner in this. And if we keep getting a no out of the schools, then maybe they can't be more of a partner in this, and we'll end up needing to think about either rejecting an idea because of that, or looking at a different place to hold the meeting. I don't want to even get into speculating about all that tonight. What I'm saying is I think there's more questions to be asked on that point, because that's a pretty fundamental aspect of the possibility of going to January. And the impact to town government in the preparation of the budget is a very significant impact to going to what otherwise, if we're going to include a meaningful, authoritative AB vote on the budget, having it align with town meeting day, have it be the one time instead of having to go to the polls twice each spring, makes sense to me. I'd like to try harder to make that particular option work if there's a way to make it work. If there isn't a way to make it work, then to work in the more complicated array of multiple steps where it does become, there's other factors to consider. But my point is, we need a little time. If there's a willingness and an interest on this panel to dig deeper into this stuff and to have another discussion another night when we've got more definitive information in front of us. We need some time to put that more definitive information together. And so I don't think we ought to try to do this a week from tonight. I think we ought to do it hopefully at the next meeting after that, which is a couple of weeks on from there. I would assume that in a 2-week or so period, we ought to be able to pull this stuff together so that we'd be ready for 3 weeks from tonight. So that's, I just wanted to suggest that as we continue to decide how we want to proceed, because I think it would be a big mistake to try to continue this discussion next week and be not much more informed than we are today.
But it would also be really helpful to know what everybody's looking for.
I can
So,
send
you
you a
know,
list of my questions. I was
you know.
gonna do that anyway. Send you a list of my questions.
We should communicate here. Maybe, how about this? How about this? Because you shouldn't send us lists of
Right.
questions.
We need to
Because of
do
the
this.
open meetings law.
Yeah.
So how about we do this instead? How about a week from tonight, we have some more discussion about this for the purpose of naming gaps, naming things you all need to see for us to have the more complete conversation that we need to have to get to a place. And then prior to the next meeting after that, we try to be responsive to those.
Which is the 18th.
Hillary.
Which is the 18th.
So, if it's helpful, for you all, I have a list of things that I think would be helpful for you all to consider so that you can think about going into
That would be great.
next week.
Yes.
I think the school, right, is a big question. We started looking at the latches, that's come up a bunch. We started looking at some concerns with that, and we're trying to reach out again to restart that conversation, but venue. And with the school district, recognizing that they are a unified school district, so they don't just report to the Brattleboro voters. It's not just Brattleboro taxpayers. So timeline of town report, the legal questions, the budget timeline, and just resources and budgets in terms of pulling all of these things off. And so I think that some people that would be important for you all to connect with and talk to would certainly be the town attorney, members of the select board, the communications coordinator specifically in terms of the timeline of pulling off the town report. I would say this school, whether it's the superintendent or the principal or whoever you all feel, whatever level you feel you need to go to. I know that we're absent an official finance director, but whoever is playing that role, whether it's Bonnie or Sally or some combination, and the town manager's office.
Yeah.
I think that those are key players that you really need to get feedback from. I think you're hearing from a select group of the public, and we have results of a ballot that we can interpret in whatever way we want. Y'all have talked to me, I'm happy to continue that conversation from my perspective and the logistics and timeline. And so I think that I would be a great resource, but I think that there's a lot of other people that need to be brought into the conversation that can offer different perspectives and expertise on this discussion.
Yeah, and I agree, like the January one is totally different than what we're doing now.
Right. But the March one is also, I mean, you've gotta think about, you've talked about timeline, but also budget and resources, not just in terms of another ballot, but also in terms of what my staff can handle, and do we need to ask the select board to add another staff member to pull this off? In the town clerk's office. So those are considerations beyond just pulling off the election, right?
Well, and part of it, I won't make my comment now, I'll wait.
So one of my questions, besides the ones that, some of them were Hillary's questions, but I don't understand what a reduced overhead election is. Can somebody explain that
I
to
can
me?
explain what we meant by that, and Hillary's gonna have an opinion about it. And so what we wanted to do was float a possibility in the consideration here, subject to lots of details needing to be worked out. But there have been times in the past when the town held elections in these two rooms. And holding an election that has a more complex ballot attached to it when there's 3 districts, that was very complicated to do here, problematic, I would even say. And we've got a great system set up that we do it time and again now over at the Legion. And the question that we're raising is if it was AB, OTM, AB, and so there's a second AB each spring, could that second one where it's gonna be the town voters coming out to vote on the budget, it's gonna be a very simple ballot, could that election be held in these 2 rooms with a smaller logistical challenge and a smaller group of people having to manage it?
So I would say that yes, that is certainly a consideration, and I would say in terms of the cost of that, we don't pay anything to hold the elections at the Legion. That's part of, but we have a 10-year MOU with them to hold every certainly regularly scheduled election at their space, and that helps them with their community involvement and 501c3 status. And so there's no charge for that. The savings might be in terms of how many people do we need to hire. We pay minimum wage, so it would be a small savings. It's not, but we're also closing our office, so any revenue we'd be bringing in is lost. And so there are pros and cons to that. The other question becomes, are we using a tabulator or are we hand counting? We save money by not using a tabulator. But if there's 6,000 people that show up, we need to hire enough counters to be here and physically be counting. And so I don't know yet what that cost savings or loss is, because we don't have anything to go off of. And so might it save us money by holding it here? Yeah, maybe, but it's not gonna be a significant amount because we're not paying rent. We're not paying a fee to use the Legion, and so it might be some staff savings, there might be lost revenue. I don't know if that's a significant savings or not.
So would the cost of using the tabulators be more than hiring some people to count?
We don't know how many people are gonna show up yet, and so it's hard to say. It might take us 3 years to know how many people we actually need to hire to do that, or how long it's going to take us. And doing a tabulator for one yes/no question might be less money because it's programming for one district, it's fewer words than our regular ballot. I don't have the answers to those questions at this moment in time.
Okay.
Was there other things on your list, Marla? You don't have to have them all now, but.
No, those were my big questions.
Okay, so our plan for next week would be for everybody to come with your questions so that we can have time to get them answered by the 18th.
We would start working on this
Yes, now.
sooner.
Yes, we would start
And
now.
we would hear whatever you have to say next week and make sure that we also cover that to bring back as complete a set of answers as possible for the
Because
18th.
Yeah, because we already have a list of questions that we have put together when we were putting this together.
There are lots of questions.
Yeah, there are lots.
Yeah.
Irene, may I just ask one simple question? Is Timothy Belknap, District 9, homeowner, voter, taxpayer. Just one quick question regarding how would a January OTM followed by a March Australian ballot compare price-wise to what we just done this last spring? To me, I don't see any difference there.
Right, and I mean, that's one of the considerations. I mean, that's what's, we actually wrote that down.
Yeah.
That it's already in this, embedded in the system. So
So
we've
we
recognized
believe that'll
that.
be the least expensive
Yeah.
of any of the options
But-
because it doesn't include an extra step.
Right, I'm just speaking to the simple ballot here is kind of taking us down the garden path of option 3 or 4, when really option 1 is Like, I would say there's probably no price difference there, but I would defer to Hillary on that.
Right, but there are logistical challenges there. So then the question becomes like fleshing out each sufficiently to be able to weigh those logistical challenges. Maybe they don't end up being so daunting.
Yeah.
Versus the extra cost, which maybe doesn't end up being very much, right? But we don't know the answers to those questions, so we want to come back with
Just for clarity.
more data.
Yeah, because part of the thing, and I wrote it down because I agreed with Hannah when she was talking about we have to function effectively. I mean, what we want is to go through a budget process where we come out with a responsible town budget. And if the town staff tells us, if you want us to have a budget ready by December, we're just gonna be making numbers up, you know, to get a budget done by December to be voted on an open town meeting in January. You know, I think we have to weigh, is that being effective? You know what I mean? So there are other things besides what the dollar amount is to cost to something. We still have to be really run a responsible town. I think that's what we all want. So that's part of the factor of with a January, can we come out with a responsible budget by the time that we want to vote on it? You know, so those are the different things that I think we have to think about.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, Spoon.
I'm gonna surprise you. Having spent my life studying democracy and being totally devoted to it, even though I might as an aside, as far as I know, the only really pure social system is anarchism. But for practical purposes, democracy is the best that I know of. And transparency, which goes right along with all that, is very, very important, et cetera, et cetera. All that said, as I sit here listening to the proceedings, I'm not sure you're running this like you should be. I honestly feel you should have an open part of the meeting where people can come and talk, maybe the first half of your meeting, and then go in, be yourselves, find time for yourselves as a commission alone. I'm asking myself, you know, does it diminish the democratic ideals if I am not physically present to listen to how you make sausage? And the fact of it is being filmed, it is being recorded, so all of the information is available to people. And the more important expectation, again, is that when you finish, you have a good explanation and reasoning for everything that you are proposing. But I think you would be more effective if you take your input and then work it out where you have time and peace and no interference and become, I think, a more solid commission.
There is open meeting law.
Spoon, you've surprised us. Yeah, it's not the most comfortable thing. You've been on this dais.
Both sides.
It's hard to have conversations, especially when you're exploring unknowns and trying to like name the uncertainties sufficiently that you can then get a handle on those uncertainties sufficiently to make a good decision. Those are not the most comfortable processes to do in public, and it's the public's work. I aside from legal questions of whether or not we could excuse everybody from the room, I think it would just be an enormous mistake for us to excuse everybody from the room. I think we need to do our work, the public's work, hard as it may be in this setting.
And I'll just note that I don't think we've done any sort of like drafting on the fly in this room. It's a lot of,
That's right.
here's what we think, and then someone, usually me, writes it, and then we come back and talk about it the next time.
Yeah, that's right. So the drafting has happened outside, but getting to the place where we can name what we'd like to see drafted has all happened here, and that's why it's taken us years.
Yeah. And we can, we'll hopefully get to a point where this is on the ballot and we will go through an educational process and explain to people why we've done certain things and I mean,
yeah.
we have a really good, we have to remind people, we didn't just talk about open, representative town meeting. There's a lot of things in this charter that we're very happy with. Joy.
I would like to make it known that amongst the title topics, the high-level topics that have already been stated, Hillary first, and then others, that would fill in a lot of my concerns. So I do hope that it's not waiting for next week to get the very specific questions that I hope one or two become almost linchpin, and of course we won't know until the answer. Is it a legal question? Is it venue question? Is it efficiency question? So the high level view of those absolutely would fill it, any hesitation of no one does it in January. Why? That could be the legal question.
Well, you have to.
Yes, we can amend with charter, absolutely. Yeah. But I just, is that a legal question? If it's not, fine. But just, I acknowledge that the topics that cause hesitation, that cause confusion, the high level have been stated. So as they get fleshed out, yes, to consider hearing from the subject matter experts, whether it's just in a memo, I'm not demanding anyone to show up in person, but.
Right. Yeah. I want to make sure I understand your point. So you made a very specific
example,
and that's if it's just an example and you're making a broader point, I want to make sure I've got your broader point. So why does nobody do it in January is a question you asked that deserves an answer. If we can learn one. Are there other similarly specific questions, or was that meant to send us on a path towards the kinds of things you're concerned about? Because I don't know what other specific things might be on that kinds of things list.
Right. Today I meant it as an example, and I have no doubt that more details would give potential, but I wouldn't want to stop the investigation for 2 weeks.
Right.
Because some people might be available earlier than later.
Totally. We actually have some meetings already set up for next week in case this was continuing to move forward, and so we will follow through on those and we'll do some more work together. Yeah. But I think it's important that you all get a chance to say to us next week that, upon further reflection, this, and this, or, I need answers to this, and this. And it may be that we've already gathered answers to that by the time you name it, but it may be that we haven't, and then we would have some additional time to go and do that.
Yeah.
Does it feel okay about that?
Yeah.
We'll move forward. Okay. So next week, we will continue this. Peter and I will continue our work. We'll put together what we can, and then next week, everybody come with some other thoughts. And then we can have a full-blown discussion on where we want to go and how we want to do it on the 18th. Is that the day? Is that our next meeting?
Yeah, the 18th.
Okay.
I think it's the 18th.
Yeah, we're gonna look it up.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I looked it up, but I can't remember.
Given that, unless anybody disagrees, we were gonna talk about the Finance Committee and the Human Services Committee, but we should maybe wait until we know what we're doing. One of the only thing the Human Services Committee wants is we have them in our charter now having 11 members, and upon reflection, they want us to have 9 members. So these are not big things. these are just two of the things because they came out of they were in representative town meeting, we put them on open town meeting, I wanna make sure we're still comfortable with the language, but it's nothing, we haven't been asked to do anything major, so we can hold off on those if we want, until we're comfortable with what we're doing with the Australian ballot. So we can,
And just on that point, I think that this whole dual vote thing needs to be discussed with them, because this would also affect their timelines.
Oh, the finance committee's
Yeah.
timelines,
And Human
yeah.
Services Committee.
especially if we switch when.
And especially if they're getting elected in March.
Yeah.
And then they're expected to do all of their work by December. Is that realistic?
Yep. Okay, so, does anyone have any other business? Or we'll come back next Thursday here at 6:15.
Are we not talking about the quorum?
Well, do we wanna talk about it now, or do we wanna?
I mean, Bob again can't be here tonight, but he wanted to make it clear that he does not think that it is legal to do a quorum, because everyone has the right to vote, and by having a quorum, you're telling people that they can't vote.
This only came up from, it was actually David Gartenstein that was the one that made the suggestion that do we need a quorum? So that's why we put that on our.
So if you
agenda.
want him to do that memo for next time, it would just be good to know if you need more information, or if that's sufficient to end that discussion.
No, I think a memo from him would be good.
I think for backup documentation.
So. I did an agenda for next meeting.
Then we just wait on that, 'cause we're gonna do it. Okay, is there any other business that anyone has? Otherwise, we'll see everybody back here a week from today at 6:15.
Yep.
Does somebody wanna make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Thanks, everybody, for coming and offering your opinions. We appreciate it.